June 21, 1944. Just after dawn. The jungle outside WWII Island, Pacific Theater. The air is already thick, humid, sour with rot and cordite. Sweat runs into eyes before the first shot is fired. Mosquitoes hang in the shade like smoke that breathes. Private First Class Robert Red Malloy, 41st Infantry Division, presses his helmet lower as another rifle round snaps overhead and disappears into the trees. Somewhere ahead, no more than 40 yards, a Japanese bunker squats into the coral ridge like an animal that refuses to be dug out. They've been firing at it for hours. Rifle fire, bar bursts, hand grenades lobbed blind. Nothing works. Every time someone moves, the bunker answers, short, disciplined bursts from a Nambu machine gun that cuts the jungle into strips. The firing slit is narrow, protected by coral rock and logs soaked dark with moisture. Smoke drifts out, but the gun never stops. Malloy can hear men breathing behind him, fast, shallow. He smells burned powder and something worse, blood in the dirt. A lieutenant crawls up beside him, voice low but sharp. Bazooka team, up. The word carries weight. Everyone knows what the bazooka is supposed to do. Everyone also knows it already failed twice. Earlier that morning, 2 M6 high-explosive rockets slammed into the bunker's face. The blasts flared bright, showered debris, and did absolutely nothing. The gun came back online within seconds, angrier than before. The bunker didn't crack. It absorbed. Now the platoon is pinned, casualties are mounting, and the ridge has to be taken because if this bunker stays alive, nothing behind it matters. Malloy looks over his shoulder as the bazooka team crawls forward. Corporal James Haney, lean, dirt-smeared, carrying the tube like a fragile relic. His assistant hugs the rocket crate close to his chest. But this time, the crate is different. The lid is stenciled in faded lettering, WP. White phosphorus. Malloy doesn't fully understand what that means yet, but the lieutenant does, so do the men who loaded it. The order didn't come down officially. No field manual recommends this. No diagram explains it. This is improvisation born from desperation. Haney pauses, looks up at the lieutenant. You sure, sir? The lieutenant hesitates, just a fraction of a second, then nods. Do it. The jungle seems to hold its breath. Haney shoulders the bazooka, sights the slit. His assistant slides the rocket in careful, almost reverent. This isn't a concussive charge, it's something else entirely. Malloy presses his face into the dirt. The shot cracks, not a thunderous explosion, but a sharp, metallic whoomp. The rocket streaks forward and disappears into the bunker opening. For half a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then the world turns white. Not bright, violent. A flash erupts from inside the bunker, pouring out like liquid fire. White phosphorus ignites on contact with air, and the enclosed space becomes a furnace. Burning fragments splatter outward, clinging to sandbags, logs, uniforms, anything they touch. A sound follows that Malloy will never forget. Not an explosion. Screaming. High-pitched, panicked, inhuman. Smoke billows out, thick, chalky, alive. It burns the eyes from 30 yards away. The heat hits the Americans even through the jungle humidity, like opening the door to an oven. The machine gun stops. Malloy lifts his head just enough to see figures bursting from the bunker's rear exit. Japanese soldiers, faces streaked white, uniforms smoldering, hands clawing at their own bodies as the phosphorus eats through cloth and skin. One man throws himself into the dirt, rolling, screaming. It doesn't help. White phosphorus doesn't care about pain or courage or discipline. It burns until it consumes itself, or the oxygen is gone. Another soldier stumbles into the open, arms flailing, eyes blind with smoke. A rifle slips from his hands. He collapses before anyone fires a shot. The bunker that held them all morning is suddenly empty. Silent. Malloy realizes he's standing, he doesn't remember getting up. Around him, the platoon stares in stunned disbelief. Men who fought through New Guinea, who watched friends die to mortars and snipers, are frozen, trying to understand what they just saw. The lieutenant is the first to move. Forward now. They rush the position cautiously. No return fire, no trap, just smoke, heat, and a smell that doesn't belong to any battlefield rulebook. Inside the bunker, it's worse. The walls are blackened, the air is unbreathable, burn marks crawl across the coral like veins. The emplacement that laughed off grenades is reduced to a charred, choking cave. No one speaks. They don't have to. By nightfall, word spreads along the line. Not officially, not in reports, but from foxhole to foxhole. There's a new way to crack bunkers. A way that doesn't just kill, it terrifies. Japanese prisoners, captured later that week, whisper a name for it. A phrase passed in low voices among defenders who thought their positions were safe. White death. Because you can fight bullets. You can endure shells. You can even die facing a blast. But this hunts you in the dark. This turns your bunker into a coffin before you realize you're buried. And on islands where bunkers are everything, where survival depends on enclosed, hidden positions, the psychological balance begins to shift. The Americans don't fully grasp it yet. But the war in the Pacific has just crossed an invisible line. And the men on both sides feel it. The smoke doesn't clear for hours. Even after the bunker is secured, even after the wounded are pulled back and the dead counted, the chalky haze hangs low over the coral ridge like a warning. Men move through it with handkerchiefs over their mouths, eyes stinging, throats raw. No one lingers inside the emplacement longer than necessary. Private Malley sits against a tree, helmet off, hands shaking despite himself. He has been under fire before. Artillery, mortars, air attack, all of it violent but familiar. This was different. The platoon medic passes by, muttering, "Jesus Christ," under his breath. He doesn't elaborate, he doesn't need to. By midday, officers from neighboring companies arrive to inspect the position. They walk the bunker carefully, stepping around blackened patches on the floor where fragments still hiss faintly when touched by air. A captain crouches near the firing slit, studies the burn patterns, then looks back at the lieutenant. "What did you hit them with?" The lieutenant answers evenly. "White phosphorus, bazooka delivered." There's a pause. "That wasn't authorized." "No, sir." Another pause, longer this time. Then the captain nods. "Noted." That single word, noted, is how battlefield innovation often begins. By evening, similar requests ripple up and down the line. Units pinned by bunkers ask quietly if any WP rockets are available, or if someone knows how to modify standard rounds, or if anyone has seen what happened on the ridge. The answers spread faster than orders ever could. The Japanese defenders feel it first. Captured diaries and interrogations later reveal confusion turning into dread. Bunkers had always been their advantage. On islands like Biak, Peleliu, Saipan, positions carved into coral and rock were designed to absorb punishment. Artillery could crater the surface. Bombs could scorch the jungle. But inside those bunkers, defenders waited, patient, protected. Until now. White phosphorus doesn't behave like other weapons. It doesn't just explode and vanish. It sticks. It crawls. It finds oxygen and feeds on it, producing searing heat and thick smoke that invades lungs, blinds eyes, and burns flesh down to bone. In enclosed spaces, it becomes something closer to an environment than a projectile. A grenade might kill you. WP follows you. Word reaches Japanese units defending adjacent ridges. Americans are firing something new, something white, something that turns bunkers into ovens. Men who had faced flamethrowers and believed they understood fear described this as worse. Flamethrowers announce themselves, You hear the roar, you see the stream, there's a moment to react. White phosphorus gives no warning. Just a flash. Then fire is everywhere. On the American side, reactions are complicated. Some men cheer, the bunkers fall faster now, fewer frontal charges, fewer bodies carried back. From a tactical perspective, the logic is brutally simple. If the enemy refuses to surrender and designs defenses meant to absorb conventional fire, you adapt. Others are quieter. Malloy overhears two veterans arguing near a supply dump. One insists it's no different than grenades, just more effective. The other says nothing, just shakes his head and spits into the dirt. That night, Malloy dreams of the bunker again, of the white flash, of screaming that doesn't fade when he wakes up. The next morning, orders come down, not official authorization, but tolerance. WP rockets are not to be wasted. They are to be used against hardened positions only. The wording is careful, legalistic, enough distance from responsibility. Bazooka teams are briefed quickly. Handle with care, avoid friendly exposure, do not fire from enclosed spaces. Everyone understands the subtext. This weapon demands respect. The first coordinated assault using WP follows 2 days later. Another coral ridge, another network of bunkers that had repelled multiple attacks. This time, the infantry advances differently. There's less hesitation, less shouting, more quiet efficiency. When the bazooka fires, the men brace, not just for blast, but for what comes after. The result is immediate. Japanese fire slackens, then stops entirely. Survivors flee their positions almost instantly, abandoning weapons, packs, even wounded comrades. Some are cut down as they run. Others disappear into the jungle, no longer interested in holding ground. The position falls in minutes. An officer watching through binoculars lowers them slowly. They didn't wait, he says, they ran. That is the true shift. Not physical destruction, psychological collapse. Bunkers were meant to be sanctuaries. Once that belief is broken, the entire defensive doctrine fractures. A position you don't trust becomes a trap, a liability. Japanese units begin modifying behavior, more emphasis on dispersed fighting, less reliance on static defenses, but on terrain like WWII, mobility is limited. Coral ridges and caves dictate where you can hide. And the Americans know it. By July, the tactic is no longer isolated. It's discussed in after-action reports. Sanitized language replaces raw experience, incendiary effects effective against enclosed fortifications, no mention of screaming, no description of what it does to men inside. Malloy is reassigned to rear security after catching shrapnel in his leg. From a distance, he watches the war continue without him, hears rumors from replacements passing through, sees the way their faces change when WP is mentioned. One evening, he speaks with a chaplain who has just returned from the line. The chaplain stares at his coffee, untouched. They called it White Death, the man says quietly. The prisoners, they begged us not to use it. Malloy doesn't respond. What would he say? That it works. That it saves American lives. That war stopped being fair a long time ago. The chaplain exhales. Men fear dying, he continues, but they fear burning alive more. The sentence hangs between them. By late summer, intelligence intercepts confirm it. Japanese communications warn specifically about WP bazooka fire. Some units are ordered to abandon bunkers at the first sign of it. Others are told to fight anyway, better to die quickly than like that. The Americans don't celebrate this knowledge. They exploit it. Because in jungle warfare, breaking the enemy will is often faster than breaking his body. And now a single rocket can do both. But as the tactic spreads, so does unease. Not among generals, among the men pulling the trigger. Because every time the bazooka fires a white-tipped rocket into a dark opening, someone knows, really knows, what happens inside. And that knowledge doesn't fade when the smoke clears. It follows you into the next attack, into the next night, into whatever version of yourself survives the war. On Bayek, the ridge is taken, the island will eventually fall, the maps will be updated, arrows will move forward. But something else has changed, something harder to chart. The war in the Pacific is no longer just about killing the enemy. It is about convincing him that nowhere is safe. And once that door is opened, there is no closing it again. The rain starts just before midnight. Warm, heavy drops hammer the jungle canopy and turn foxholes into shallow grave of mud. On Bayek Island, the front never truly sleeps, it only pauses, listening. Sergeant Thomas Keegan crouches beneath a poncho, counting the seconds between distant artillery thumps. He has fought on 3 islands now, he knows the pattern. When the Japanese go quiet, it's never because they're gone. It's because they're waiting. Keegan's platoon is scheduled to advance at first light toward another coral escarpment riddled with caves and interlocking bunkers. The map calls it Objective Ridge 210. The men call it the Teeth. Intelligence says the positions are mutually supporting, reinforced with overhead cover and stocked for weeks. The kind of place that eats frontal assaults. 6 months ago, that would have meant one thing: casualties. Now the loadout is different. 2 bazooka teams. 4 WWII rockets each. Keegan watches the teams move into position at dawn, the jungle steaming as the rain lifts. The smell of wet leaves mixes with oil and cordite. Cicadas scream as if something has disturbed the earth itself. At 700, the ridge opens fire. Machine guns stitch the approach path. Rifle shots crack from unseen slits. Mortar rounds thump into the trees overhead, showering bark and leaves. The platoon hits the dirt. Keegan raises his hand, waits for the signal. The bazooka team crawls forward, hugging a shallow depression. The assistant pops the crate. White-tipped rockets. Chalk-marked fins. The gunner exhales and fires. The rocket disappears into a cave mouth no wider than a doorway. A heartbeat passes, then a white bloom erupts, brighter than sunlight filtered through jungle leaves. Smoke pours outward, thick and living, rolling downhill like fog with intent. The effect is immediate. Gunfire from that sector dies, not tapers, dies. Within seconds, shapes emerge from side exits and concealed crawl spaces. Japanese soldiers run without formation, without cover, some throwing weapons aside as if they're burning their hands. They are not charging. They are fleeing. Keegan doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. His men surge forward instinctively, firing controlled bursts. The ridge collapses in minutes. Later, as engineers move in to clear the caves, one of them comes back pale. "Sergeant," he says quietly, "they didn't stay." Keegan nods. He already knows what that means. Across the Pacific, similar scenes unfold. On Peleliu, where coral ridges form a honeycomb of death, Marines encounter defenders who abandon bunkers at the first sign of incendiary fire. Some positions are found intact, stocked, unmanned, rifles stacked neatly as if the occupants left in a hurry they hadn't planned. On Saipan, intercepts reveal hurried Japanese warnings: do not remain inside when the white fire comes. The advice spreads faster than orders to hold ground. The islands themselves seem to learn. Caves that once promised safety now feel like traps. Every enclosed space becomes suspect. Darkness, once an ally, turns hostile. For American units, the tactical implications are profound. No more grinding attrition against bunkers that refuse to die. No more days lost to positions that absorb shells and spit back bullets. Advances accelerate, lines move, objectives fall ahead of schedule. Command notices. Reports circulate upward, stripped of emotion, polished for review. Incendiary rockets effective against hardened fortifications. Enemy exhibits rapid withdrawal behavior. reduced friendly casualties observed. Numbers replace screams. But on the ground, the men feel the difference in their bones. Bazooka gunners carry a new weight, not physical but moral. They know what happens after the trigger pull. They've seen it, smelled it, heard it. Some try not to think about it. Others can't stop. Private Eugene Harris, 19, assistant gunner, vomits after his first WP engagement. He tells the medic it's the smoke. The medic doesn't argue. That night, Harris scrubs his hands raw in a stream, even though nothing touched them. The Japanese response evolves quickly, but options are limited. Mori emphasis on open fighting, Mori reliance on night infiltration, Mori suicide charges, born not of fanaticism alone, but calculation, better to die moving than trapped in a cave of fire. This, too, changes the war. American units brace for desperate counterattacks, night perimeters tighten, flares pop more often, the jungle becomes louder after dark. The weapon that breaks bunkers also sharpens the enemy's last instincts. And yet, despite the unease, despite the whispered doubts, no one suggests stopping. Because every time WP is used, fewer Americans are carried back on stretchers. Every ridge taken quickly is one less day under sniper fire, one less dawn assault against an enemy who refuses to surrender. War has always been a ledger of trade-offs. By late 1944, white phosphorus is no longer an experiment. It is a known quantity, a tool, a psychological lever pulled when nothing else works. And the Japanese know it. Interrogations reveal a recurring phrase, not official doctrine, folk knowledge passed between units, between survivors. If the Americans bring the white fire, leave. Leave the bunker. Leave the position. Leave the idea that walls can save you. The islands are still defended, the fighting is still brutal, but something fundamental has shifted. The Americans are no longer just breaking defenses. They are breaking beliefs. And once belief is gone, no amount of concrete or coral can hold a line. But as victory inches closer, another question lingers, unspoken, unresolved. What happens when the men who learned this lesson go home? What do they carry with them long after the jungle fades? Because some weapons end battles. Others follow you forever. February 19th, 1945. Just after 900 hours. The black sand of Iwo Jima. The beach is already a graveyard. Landing craft burn at the waterline. Men stumble forward under the weight of packs and fear, boots sinking into ash that gives nothing back. From the high ground, Japanese guns fire with surgical calm. Every yard is covered, every movement punished. For the first time in the Pacific, the Americans face an island designed not just to be defended, but to bleed them dry. Bunkers are everywhere. Caves spiderweb the volcanic rock. Positions are layered, reinforced, rehearsed. This is not Bayek. This is something else. Captain Leonard Len Fisher, United States Marine Corps, watches his company pinned against a low rise of sand and broken rock. Casualties are already unacceptable. Flamethrowers are working, but slowly. Every approach is covered by overlapping fire. He calls for bazookas. When the teams arrive, Fisher doesn't hesitate. WP, first round. No one argues. The rocket vanishes into a cave mouth set high in the slope. The flash is brief, almost swallowed by daylight, but the smoke that follows is unmistakable. White, rolling, aggressive. Inside the mountain, something changes. Fisher sees it through his binoculars. Movement where there should be none. Figures spilling from side exits, choking, blinded, disoriented, not charging, not counterattacking. Escaping. The Marines surge forward. They take ground measured in feet, but they take it. By nightfall, Fisher's sector is still contested, but something vital has cracked. The Japanese defenders are no longer settled inside their fortress. They're being pushed into the open, into kill zones they tried to avoid. Iwo Jima becomes a lesson written in blood and ash. WP does not win the battle. Nothing wins Iwo Jima cleanly. But it alters the rhythm, forces movement, Denny's sanctuary. On Okinawa, the pattern repeats on a larger, darker scale. The fighting drags on for weeks. Rain turns the ground into sludge. Bunkers are deeper, smarter, better concealed. White phosphorus is used sparingly, judiciously, but when it is, the effect is consistent. Japanese units abandon positions sooner. Counterattacks grow more desperate. The psychological strain shows in everything from radio traffic to prisoner behavior. American commanders understand what they are seeing. Static defense, the cornerstone of Japanese island doctrine, is failing under the combined pressure of flamethrowers, armor, and now WP-delivered fire. The enemy can endure shells. They can hide from bombs. They cannot hide from air that burns. But for the men applying the pressure, the cost is not abstract. Private Eugene Harris, older now, thinner, eyes permanently tired, fires his last WP rocket outside Shuri. He does it mechanically, efficiently. Afterwards, he sits behind cover and lights a cigarette with shaking hands. He doesn't watch the cave. He doesn't need to. That night, rain pounds Okinawa like judgment. Harris lies awake, staring into darkness that feels too close. He knows he did what was required. He knows men beside him are alive because of it. And still, something inside him resists being quiet. Chaplains, medics, officers, they all notice the same thing. The men involved in these assaults are not boastful. They don't trade stories the way infantry always has. There is no bravado attached to this weapon. Only silence. Because white phosphorus crosses a boundary most soldiers never articulate, but all of them feel. It doesn't just kill. It invades. The war ends months later. The islands fall, the surrender is signed, weapons are stacked, ships turn east, carrying men who survived a world few civilians can imagine. In the official histories, WP appears as a footnote, a technical detail, an effective incendiary option against hardened targets. No chapter dwells on what it did to the men who used it, or the ones it was used against. But in quiet moments, years later, veterans remember. They remember the flash, the smoke that moved like a living thing, the sound that followed. And they understand something most people never will. That war is not just about victory or defeat. It is about lines crossed once and never uncrossed. The White Death broke bunkers. It broke stalemates. It broke the enemy's faith in walls and rock. But it also left a mark on everyone who saw it work. A mark that didn't fade with peace. Because some weapons don't stay on the battlefield. They come home with you. And they wait.